So today's film, Blade Runner. I think this movie came, let me just double check my facts here. I'm pretty sure this movie came out in 1981, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check. 1982. So this movie is, so usually when I teach this movie, I teach it in the science fiction unit. But I decided that we would do it in the noir. I decided I'd do it in the noir unit this time because it's very much an example of how noir has sort of translated over into other genres. So it has this sort of noir aesthetic to it, as well as having other elements being part of it too, such as the fact that it's a detective story, for instance. So Blade Runner from 1982. This movie was a commercial flop when it came out. It did not make a lot of money. 1982 was a weird year for film. There's two of the greatest sort of science fiction type of movies ever came out that year. You had Blade Runner, and you also had John Carpenter's The Thing, which was a great horror film, awesome horror film. But neither movie made a lot of money. Both of them were flops. That 1982 was the year that a certain science fiction film came out from Steven Spielberg that was nice and family friendly, right? And one of you guys guess what's it's about an alien, right? What's the movie I'm referring to?
E.T.
E.T. Right? Yeah, E.T. came out that year. Nice family friendly movie. It came out that summer. Blade Runner and The Thing also came out that summer. E.T. crushed it at the box office. This was a time period where the 80s, the early 80s especially, was a time period where optimism sort of rang in the air again. You know, if you go back and look at the 1970s, in the 1970s with film, it was very much a pessimistic time. I guess really the only example we've had in the 70s so far is Cuckoo's Nest. Well, we had Rocky too, but the 70s was known for being a very pessimistic decade for film. I mean, that's when some of the greatest like horror films came out: The Exorcist, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, um, all kinds of great horror films that decade. But even a lot of the great dramas were very cynical. Blade Runner would have almost been a better movie for the 70s than it was the 80s. By the time you got to the 80s, all that sort of leftover energy and anger from the Vietnam War has sort of subsided. People really started to feel like patriotic and stuff again. Whether you love or hate the guy, Ronald Reagan, when he got elected the president, it sort of changed, you know, the general mood in the air. So, with that said, though, you know, there was a lot of really great films from the 80s that came out, but a lot of them didn't make a lot of money just because that wasn't the popular type of movie then. So Blade Runner was definitely a commercial flop. All these other movies, a lot of these other movies we've watched so far made a lot of money at the box office, like Titanic, Rocky, Cuckoo's Nest. A lot of these other movies made a lot of money. This one was a flop. However, this movie became popular thanks to the birth of home video. So in the 80s, when VHS became widely popular, everyone started to have a VHS player in their house, you know, with the rise of like the video store where people could go rent movies and all that stuff, right? this movie started to become a cult classic. So with the rise of home video, right, a lot of these movies that would flop suddenly gained a second life again. The Shawshank Redemption was another example of that, right? The Shawshank Redemption, no, not even home video, but like cable TV was the reason for its rise up again, right? Because it didn't make a lot of money, but Ted Turner putting it on TNT and TBS every day, right, really helped give the movie second life. Same thing with Blade Runner. Of course, just recently, I think back in 2019, a sequel came out to Blade Runner 2049. So if you really liked this universe and this world, there's a sequel that just came out a couple of years ago. I think Harrison Ford comes back for it. It's got Dave Bautista in it too. I actually haven't watched it yet, and I need to. But I've heard the sequel was just as good as this. So if later in the class, whenever we do a sequel analysis paper, this might be a paper that this might be a film that you choose to do it on. But it's directed by Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott is our director. He is also known for another film we will do in class later called Alien, right? He also directed Alien. But Ridley Scott's directed all kinds of stuff over time. He directed The Martian, which just came out a couple of years ago with Matt Damon. I don't know if any of you guys saw that film, but he's most known for Alien and Blade Runner. He also did Gladiator from 2000, which Russell Crowe was in. I'm sure some of you guys in here have seen Gladiator. So yeah, Scott is one of the Hollywood's most prominent directors. He still makes a lot of movies even to this day. So most known for the Alien and Blade Runner franchises, though. So we'll see Scott at work again later in the class. Harrison Ford is our main actor. Was Harrison Ford. We know him also from Star Wars, and as he plays Han Solo. We know him from Indiana Jones. He's Indiana Jones. Right. Harrison Ford was one of the biggest stars of the 80s and 90s. In the 2000s, he stopped doing as many movies, but still, you still see him in some movies today. I know he came back for the recent travesties that was Star Wars 7, 8, and 9. Right? He came back for those movies. He'd probably been better off just staying home, right? You don't want to get me started on that subject. It's a sore subject for me. Yeah, we know Harrison Ford. We also got a lot of other good actors in Blade Runner as well. Rutger Hauer plays Roy, our antagonist. He was very much this sort of character actor from the 80s and 90s. He puts in a very good performance here. Daryl Hannah plays Pris, the replicant who is like she's pretty much a replicant that was designed for sex, right? Pris, Daryl Hannah, you might know her from a bunch of other films too. Still Magnolias was a great comedy / drama that she's also in. So a lot of good actors here in this film. What else to say as far as introductions? Oh yes, this film also, I say it's science fiction, but this film is known for its aesthetic its mise en scene. This sort of pessimistic society that's in the distant future, you see that this sort of aesthetic is called cyberpunk, right? Cyberpunk, the rise of punk music in the late 70s and early 80s sort of helped fuel this movement, right? So with cyberpunk, you often see these sort of large urban environments, neon lights, like very sweltering almost. Cyberpunk is a genre that focuses on a lot of what fuels cyberpunk is the injustices of capitalism. You see how the rich are very rich and the poor are very poor, and you kind of see how that works at its most extreme, if that makes sense. Which we definitely see in this film, because we see the nasty streets of Los Angeles here. This is supposed to be Los Angeles, but we also see like how well the rich people live too. So it's very much a reaction to like it's very much a reaction to capitalism. But with the punk rock aesthetic, you see things like the punk sort of haircuts, like leather clothes, right? You very much get a punk rock sort of aesthetic from this movie. And I don't know how much, if any of you guys in here are into punk music or cyberpunk, other types of cyberpunk media, but this is its own genre. So that should be enough for intros. I'm going to turn the floor over to you guys. What did you find interesting about what's your viewing experience with Blade Runner? I'll go to the gallery mode now. What's your experience watching this film? What'd you think of it? Somebody kick us off. Jessica, I see the camera went to you there.
I liked it. It wasn't one of my favorite. I'm not really into like sci-fi movies or too much, but I did like it. I do feel that he is a replica. But I don't really know much more to say about it other than I liked it. And I do find it interesting that it's 2019 and I know it's 2021, and I just like Back to the Future, even like when it went 2019 or whatever, or not too, just how they predicted the future of the flying cars and all that. I don't know. But then some things didn't really evolve like like you think they would, like the TVs, like you still like the girl when she was in the was it a strip club thing, the one with the snake, it just like showers, it's just different things. It just surprised me. I love when it's like now, and people like when the 80s saw 2019 or 2000 or whatever. I just love movies that have like this drastic contrast of what it really is. So I did enjoy that.
Yeah, Back to the Future did the same thing, right? Imagining what the distant future would look like, which also didn't really look like what it became too.
I thought it wasn't a movie that I guess was out of the genre that's kind of my favorite. The sci-fi stuff, things like that, aren't necessarily, I guess, some of my favorite movies to watch. It wasn't terrible, just from my point of view. A lot of the things that I noticed, just about like the set and the camera work, which you had mentioned a second ago, sweltering. That was a good way, kind of to describe that, because it just seemed like everybody in every scene was like sweating, and kind of like like the streets seemed so crowded, like when Deckard would be out like walking around and like on the streets, and when he was chasing that one lady, like it just seemed like the streets seemed so like dirty and crowded and like maybe polluted even, like just that they'd been kind of polluted for years, and it just kind of build up and build up. And I noticed like in some of the scenes with like when they were in Deckard's apartment, and then even some of the other rooms, like it was dark, like there was like really low lighting that was in there, but then there would be like these lights that was almost like spotlights that just kept kind of shining around the room, and just like flashing like on them, and like the neon lights. That was one thing that I noticed too. Like it did feel kind of like a retro theme. Like and that was a discussion question I picked also because that was something that kind of stuck out to me so much from the movie, like their costumes and how they dressed, and like especially like Prius, just like like her hair, and there was just like you said, like that cyberpunk, and I had not heard of the cyberpunk until I was doing the discussion question, and I kind of looked up more about it, like what the cyberpunk meant. And this was a good example, like of that kind of like that punk rock, like in the 80s. But I thought it was so funny, like all the smoke, it was just portrayed to be kind of like a dark, like there was like a lot of smoke, and like it was raining all the time, which made you, it just felt like dreary. It just felt gloomy and dreary. That was just the overall feeling of it to me. And then, but I thought that it was funny, like about the cars, and like, how the doors on the cars opened, and that's how the cars, kind of went around, like they kind of flew around. And I just remember, a lot of people thinking from back in the 80s that, um, that there would be like by now that there would be flying cars and there would be stuff like that by now. And so it was kind of funny to think, like it almost looked like even the costumes still looked like the 80s, but it was like they were trying to bring advanced technology, but they just didn't know exactly, obviously then what the technology would be in 2019.
No,
I will admit that I wasn't a big fan of the movie. I'm typically am a sci-fi person. I couldn't get into it, but towards the end I started really feeling bad for the androids, especially like people like Roy, because honestly they just want to be treated more human-like, and I don't think that's too far-fetched just because they have human emotions. So they were some were sent to even protect the human race and stuff, and they were built to help us. And I feel like we should have treated them better. Like they really could have just, instead of treating them like not even second class or anything, but they could have been treated a lot better than how they were. Which I just felt really bad for like Roy, especially because he even showed sympathy towards Deckard at the end, like by saving his life. And I feel like there was so much more that we could have learned from them.
Yeah, to build on your point there, Jaden, the movie is actually based on a book from Philip K. Dick, who is one of the great science fiction writers. The book is called, let me just refresh myself real quick. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? That's the name of the book. But this is the whole big theme of the movie, right? Which is, we'll get back to Stacy's comment in a second too about the cyberpunk. But the theme, one of the great themes of the movie is these androids, these artificial intelligences. Like, you have to kind of ask, this is going to be a question that we're going to be debating in our lifetimes, right? The next 20 or 30 years, we're not far off from this, right? Where we have machines who look like human beings walking around, right? Doing a lot of our work for us. So we are not far off from this. If you look at if you read up on the technology, we're certainly not far away. They even have robots that kind of look like this now. And this is going to invite a lot of questions, like, are they going to be almost the new type of slave class, right? Are we going to enslave these machines when we get to this point? What is the fine line between a machine and a human being? Right? Can a machine be programmed to almost have humanity? This is a question that the movie certainly asks, because we see these androids starting to display human qualities and emotions. So yeah, I don't know if any of you guys want to take that line of inquiry up, but this is something that's certainly going to impact us in our lifetimes. I saw you unmute there, Matt. You have a thought?
I was just going to mention briefly. I was kind of iffy on the movie. It definitely wasn't my favorite of the ones we watched, but by the end of it, I was pretty invested, especially with Roy's character. I thought he was pretty interesting. He just wanted to extend his life just a little bit. He just wanted to be treated like a little bit better by the humans, like it was mentioned earlier. And that's about it.
Right. So you guys are all feeling some sympathy towards Roy, it seems like, based on what Matt and Jaden said. Right. He's the antagonist of the film, but is he really? Right. Just because the movie certainly leans towards sympathizing with him. Harrison Ford is almost the bad guy in the movie, right? Who's the bounty hunter out to take these things down.
This was my first time watching the movie, and what you were saying about the future and how we had to think about these things, I think a lot of it is starting to happen too, which is kind of weird how they like knew, if that makes any sense.
What sort of things are you referring to here, Shaylee?
Like how it's futuristic type of vibe. That's where it was like scientific and stuff like that. It's kind of what's happening now. Like there's a lot new technology and stuff like that. So we really gotta like debate on new things that's going on in the world today.
Yeah, to build on Shaylee's comment, some of you guys wrote about like how this movie helped predict like video conferencing, like almost like what we're doing right now, right? You saw this type of thing happening in the movie. Good guess, right? That it would be to that.
Yeah, that was like one of the things I did get right, kind of. I mean, the way it did it wasn't like the one, it was almost like a phone booth type style kind of video chat, but it's pretty close to what we're doing right now. Exactly. I thought that was pretty crazy. And I was going to also mention about Roy. I don't know. I'd still say he's kind of the antagonist, but there's definitely a sympathetic side to him. Because like all he wanted was just his life was to be extended. But just like kind of the way he went about it still made him a bad guy in my eyes.
Here's a good question for you, Matt. Do you think that Roy had a soul?
Not really. If he's a humanoid, not an actual human, but well, I wouldn't say he has a soul. I don't think.
Right,
but there is definitely still sympathy to be felt for him.
Right. So the fact that he didn't go through like a natural birth, right, indicates that he perhaps doesn't have a soul. It seems to be your argument there, Matt. What about the rest of you?
I think he's on his way because he's getting a conscience, like he's getting like he wants to live. He's having feelings, he's developing all that. I mean, it depends on how you really define a soul. Like if you see it in a spiritual concepts of like God and all that, then no. But if you see it as, is he becoming pretty much like human? Then yes, because I think, he's becoming pretty much what it means. Like, he's becoming a person, he's becoming caring, he's becoming non-machinery. And I think he's becoming real. And to me, like a soul is something that's real, something that's like breathing, living, feeling. To me, that's a person, that's a soul. But if you see it on a spiritual aspect of being born, then no. But I do feel that in my eyes, he has a soul.
Yeah, it's kind of a gray area for me. I'm not really sure. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say he has a soul, but he definitely does have some sort of mind, or like some sort of I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but
Consciousness.
Yeah, like a consciousness. That's a good word for it. If he wasn't going about it the way he was, I would have maybe even extended his life if I had the choice. If he wasn't going around gouging people's eyes out, killing people to try and get what he's wanting, would have considered it. But yeah.
I would say he had a soul.
How so, Jaden?
Sorry, I had to tell my little brother to be quiet. I would say he had a soul just because he started really expressing emotions. Like, if you really want to go about it that way, think about today's people. A lot of people are emotionless. There's sociopaths and stuff who don't express that amount of emotion as like Roy and them did. Roy felt so bad about Chris. Like, I think he really loved her. And when she died, I think it broke him. And if he wasn't human, he wouldn't have had that compassion to save. I'm blanking on names now.
Deckard.
Yes, Decker. Like he showed real emotions, and when he didn't realize he couldn't get his life expanded, I think that's another reason why he gouged his eyes out, just out of pure anger. Emotions is what makes us human, makes us have a soul, and they clearly had that. So I would say they do have a soul.
Right. Yeah, if they have souls, that invites the question. So I guess to kind of link this philosophically, right? Does having a consciousness mean that they have a soul? I guess that's kind of the premise that we're kind of resting on here. With a consciousness, does the soul exist? We can make the argument that a bunch of animals have consciousness, right? A bunch of living animals. But depending on who you talk to, some people argue that animals don't have souls, right? There's a pretty common strand of Christianity who argues that only humans have souls, not animals. I've heard that argument made. So it depends how much you prioritize human beings. But consciousness, it's certainly hard to argue that an animal like your dog or your cat doesn't have consciousness. But does the dog or cat have a soul? Any of you guys want to go down that road? Do you think your pets have souls?
I want to think. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. No, you can go ahead.
I want to think my pet has a soul because I would hope to see it again. But as a Christian, I've always believed and been told that they do not. So I don't know.
Yeah, if you were
I mean,
in
I
it,
like.
go ahead, Matt.
Sorry. I mean, I like to believe that any living creature has like a soul of sorts, but I wouldn't say like the humanoids in this have a soul. They have a conscience, definitely, which would give me some sympathy for them, but I wouldn't say that it's a soul.
Shaylee, yes, you were gonna say something a second ago.
I was agreeing with her too. Like as a Christian, I believe that too. But then there's another part of me that's also read about like the reincarnation about people into animals and stuff like that, and it makes you wonder a lot too about that. But about the souls, it's kind of iffy because you can see he has some human characteristics, but it's hard to put a label on it, really.
Yeah, even when we talk about souls in Christianity, that some types of Christians think that they do, some types of Christians think that they don't. It's very much a denominational type question. If you could talk to the Eastern religions like Hinduism, especially like Hinduism believes animals do have souls. Like Hindus, especially eating cows is very taboo because they think that they see the cow as a very sacred animal. So again, even within Christianity, there's a lot of debate about that. Here's this is a random aside. Here's an interesting story for you guys about this topic. Back in the early 1900s, so I think this is in like the first decade of the 20th century, there was a scientist named Duncan McDougall who argued that he could prove that human beings had a soul through science. And basically what he did was he went to all these people right before they were getting ready to pass away. Like if he found out somebody was on their deathbed, he would go to them, and he would weigh their body right before they passed, and then he would weigh their body again right after they passed. And he took account of things like body mass that's lost. Like if a person passes away, like do they pee on themselves or do they crap themselves, right? So he took advantage of all, or he took account, not advantage, he took account of all that. And what he found out was in every case that the body lost exactly 21 grams of weight. 21 grams of weight. He did this test like 7 or 8 times, and he found in each case that it was 21 grams. And McDougall concluded that the soul existed, and the soul weighed 21 grams. And he also did this experiment on dogs, and dogs didn't lose any weight when they passed. So he concluded based on that dogs don't have souls. Needless to say, you guys probably haven't heard about this experiment because it's a little unethical, right? It's a little bit weird, right? To go weigh somebody right before they die and all this stuff, right? No other scientist has ever even went near that since then, but it's a fun sort of food for thought, right? If the soul does exist when it leaves the body, right? Can you account for that? Does the soul weigh 21 grams? Right.
Did he take into account like the air in the lungs, like with the expulsion of the air in the lungs? He took all that.
Yep.
Well, I don't like his story with the dogs not having souls. I watched All Dogs Went to Heaven when I was younger, and I still believe that they all have souls. So
Yeah, at least I want to believe animals have souls, but like That's a pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting study.
Yeah. Yeah, he only did this 7 or 8 times. So within the realm of scientific method, that's definitely not enough times to test this theory to say that it's conclusive.
How many times did they check with the dog? With dogs.
I think he only did that like 2 or 3 times, if I remember from reading his study.
He picked the mean dogs then. 'Cause
Yeah, I see Aleen's comment there about the mean dogs. He they either pick the mean dogs or the little annoying toy dogs like Chihuahuas, right?
I was about to say you picked Chihuahuas because those came from the devil himself.
Yeah. I'm right there with you, Jaden. I don't like those dogs either. Pugs, on the other hand, though, I'm all about some pugs. That's just me.
I have a pug.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife had a pug, so yeah, I have a soft spot for pugs.
Yeah, my pug is super sassy.
Yeah, I mean this definitely raises questions. In the film sort of throws an interpretation at you itself, because in the film, when Roy dies, well, first you see a tear go down his eye, right? And then Deckard sees a dove fly away, right? You guys all know what the dove means within Christian symbology, right? So that's almost suggesting the dove is almost suggesting that's Roy's soul flying away. Did any of you guys put 2 and 2 together with that dove?
I did. That's what was interesting and kind of tied the movie together.
What, the dove?
Yeah, the fact that he's supposed to be a robot or genetically engineered, but he cried and he screamed when he found Pris, and then when he was dying, he said it's time to die. And then after his body goes to release and he lets go of the dove, it seemed like he did have a soul. And, he was sorry for everything he did.
He also mentioned too to Deckard, like when he was kind of like hanging on the cliff, and he like helped to pull him back. He said something along the lines of, "Now you know what it's like to live in fear. Or how does it feel to live in fear?" Or something like that. And like for him to have that feeling, that would also be like the argument on whether he had a soul or not.
So you're saying here, Stacy, the fact that he feels the fear, having those types of emotions, is what maybe leads you to having a soul?
I think maybe a little bit. I could see both sides. I mean, I would think that someone that does not have a soul, I wouldn't think that they would have any empathy or express any kind of emotion if they didn't have a soul, or if they didn't know like those feelings and what it was like to have those feelings, or even express those feelings, or have empathy for someone that is expressing their feelings. So I would think, because it seemed more like these androids were made like human like, and not necessarily like robotic, like machines, like it seems like they were made more human like.
Sorry, my sister. I would say that Roy, especially, he showed more emotion than like Jeffrey Dahmer and stuff. So he's, my mind, he has that soul. He has, he's human. Like he had more compassion than most actual humans today.
They have that saying that eyes are the window into the soul, right? Roy definitely has some very emotive eyes, even within the movie. Like he actually goes to the guy who designed his eyes at one point. He says, "If only you could see what I've seen through these eyes," right? Suggesting even like all of his life experiences have even like maybe constitute his sense of self. So we know that the eye maker makes all these eyes different too. So they don't have the same eye color. This movie's pretty deep. Like the further you go into it, you could talk philosophy in this movie all day. Alleen's given us a nice link here and biblical scriptures. If you guys want to take a look at that real quick. But we should probably move to other aspects of the movie too. So one thing I want to mention about the movie is I was originally going to have you guys do Watchmen, which has like 3 different versions of it. Well, this movie also has like 3 different versions of it. The version that came out in the theater does not look like the version you watch today. This version you watch today is called the final cut. This is Ridley Scott actually went back to this movie a couple of years ago and redid it. But he had, in the original film, it ends happily. Deckard and Rachel will both go, like, they both like leave the city and go move out in the countryside somewhere, and it's a happy ending. It's very strange to watch. I asked it as a discussion question. I said you can find the happy ending of it on YouTube, but it's very much a strange sort of ending. I'll actually pull it up for you guys. It's only a 2-minute clip here.
Are you and I lovers?
Yes.
Did you know your wife a long time?
Thought I did. It's a long time.
Forever. You know what I think? I think today has been the best day of my life. You know what else I think? You and I were made for each other.
Yeah, very much a different ending here, right? That's what people who went to see it in the theaters saw. Uh, it doesn't really match the tone of the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it just goes completely out of left field with that ending. Just the entire atmosphere and everything changes.
Was it you, Matt, who said that Kubrick gave them the footage there, the stock footage?
Oh no, that was someone else. I saw that. I don't.
Yeah.
I'll have to see who.
Somebody wrote about that on the discussion board.
I was the one who talked about like what I said earlier about the video chatting thing.
Yeah,
Oh, that was Brennan that said that.
Was it Brennan?
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't match the rest of the movie. The ending that we have here with like the unicorn and stuff, I think that's more of a, I think it's definitely a better ending, even if it's not so hopeful. Yeah, we need to get to this subject too, but one of the great fan theories about the movie, you got to take Blade Runner 2049 out of it, because Harrison Ford does come back for that. So this is 2019 and they skipped to 2049. So insinuating he's not a replicant, right? If he lived that long. But one of the biggest fan theories about the movie too is that the guy who's hunting these androids is actually an android himself. So much about this movie is like they implant memories into these replicants, right? They implant a whole sense of self into them. Like they all have the same memories from their childhood and dreams that they had and things of that nature. Well, all the stuff with like the Deckard seeing the unicorns and all that stuff in his dreams, right? That's almost this suggestion that maybe he too is a replicant. Now, a lot of you guys on the discussion, I wrote down a bunch of your guys' comments here. A bunch of you guys wrote some comments about how you thought that he wasn't one. Now, we can get to some people who haven't gotten to talk much here yet. Kashina, you wrote that you thought he was one. Want to chime in here?
Yeah, I thought he was one. Just by like one of the scenes, like the beating he took. I could see like he could be one of them, and then there was another scene that oh God, what was it? Was it with his eyes that like made me think that he was one, like how they glowed. So I could see him being a replicant or whatever because of that. The movie actually also kind of reminded me of like the Matrix for some reason. Like I got that vibe.
Yeah, that's another movie we'll be watching later in the class once we get to the sci-fi unit.
I watched the new Matrix and I wasn't a big fan of it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. So
yeah, from what I heard, a lot of people liked it and a lot of people didn't like it. It was very mixed.
Yeah, I didn't like it at all.
In between.
Back in the day, I didn't really like the second and third sequel that they made. So yeah,
it's just really hard to beat the first one.
Right. So what scene did you mean? Do you remember where Deckard's eyes glowed? I don't remember that.
I'm not exactly sure what scene, but I was pretty sure I see like they did something. I can't remember. I'll have to go back and rewatch it.
It was towards I seen it too. I think
You
it was
did?
towards
Okay.
the beginning. It was like It wasn't. It was like when they came to get. It's towards the beginning, because when I seen it, I didn't think nothing of it at first, and then when I seen the android's eyes glow later on, because that was what I seen that it wasn't as bright as it was just like a gleam.
Yeah, like I said, I had to go back and rewatch it, but I remember them like that, and then the androids, like she said, they glowed, so I thought about that.
I was going to call on Ashley too. Ashley, you also thought he was a replicant. You want to chime in there with your thought? She might not be with us at the moment. We can kind of bounce around too. There's several of you in here that thought that he wasn't one. Madison, I see you're here. You wrote that you didn't think he was a replicant. You want to explain your thought?
Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't think he was. I can totally see why people would think he was one, but I just didn't think he was because he killed a lot of replicants, and I feel like he would have not wanted to do that if he was one. Like he'd want to try and save him or whatever. And I just feel like he wasn't like as strong and fast as the other replicants.
You could tell that they had sort of the strength advantage over him for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Not just Roy, but even like the one replicant that he chases through the street, the like nude dancer replicant. Like she overpowers them a lot too.
And Roy probably wouldn't have wanted to, kill him or hurt him if he was a replicant. And you could probably, if you're a replicant, you can probably tell who another one is.
I think he was a replica, but a reason I agree with him being weaker, but I think he was weaker because it was a countermeasure. Like they knew if they made him as strong as them, that he would know right away that he was a replica, and other people would know that he was a replica. So they made him weaker on purpose, but he was still stronger than an average human, but weaker than them. So it looks like, so it would be like a countermeasure. And I think I forget her name, but the android woman, I think they love each other. Rachel. I think Rachel suspects him of being a replica because you said you would know. I think she suspects him of being a replica, and the reason he doesn't know is because they don't want him to know, and they put more memories and spent more time making him seem more human because they don't want the population knowing that they're sending replicas to kill replicas and stuff like that. I think it's like a countermeasure to make him a little bit more weaker. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
what if he was a replica designed to kill replicas?
Right. That would account for Madison's comment there, right? Like if he's a replicant, he would probably spot other replicants better, which would make him a good Blade Runner, right? Because he kind of spots them pretty easily.
No, I don't really know, honestly. I can definitely see the argument. I don't quite think he is, but I definitely see the points given. He does kind of have a weird personality. Something is a little bit off about him, I'd say. But I don't know. I don't think he is. Plus, like people say, he's weaker than the replicants, which is definitely be a sign to me that he isn't one. But that could be right. He could have been designed to be weaker than the others.
Chelsea, you wrote about this too. You have anything you want to add?
I mean, yeah, just to agree with everybody else, like he was a lot weaker. I mean, they all kind of overpowered him. He needed a gun to kill him, and they were just using their bare hands. But I can see the argument too that he was made to be a replicant that killed the other replicates. But I just don't think he is either.
Yeah, the theatrical cut ending that I showed you a second ago, that would almost seem to suggest he is one, right? Because Rachel's like, I think we were made for each other, right? Which almost has a that almost has breaks that question, right? Not just a cliche romance ending, right? But also, were they made for each other, right? It kind of I thought about that when we was watching the theatrical cut end a second ago. Now you could drive yourself crazy thinking into these theories, but later on in the class, if you want to do a paper idea, or something, right? This would be an interesting movie to do because it does raise so many questions like this. I wanted to have a discussion too on the scene where Deckard and Rachel are together, right? We had this discussion last time about the history of violence, about didn't the wife consent to what looks like an assault? The same type of question can be raised too with Blade Runner, right? Did you guys find the scene, especially where Deckard kissed her, and it was really weird? What do you think of that?
I hated that entire relationship. It was so awkward and kind of forced, and it did give me a lot of the same feelings I felt during A History of Violence. It was just so weird, and it seemed so out of place. It should not have belonged there, and it should not have been part of the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, that scene was pretty uncomfortable. I don't know if it was probably worse than the History of Violence one, I'd say.
What the actual thing that he did was worse than, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Right, but maybe he crossed even more of a line. It's less gray. I guess you could probably make the argument. Aline agrees with
yeah, I guess maybe because that she's just a humanoid and they weren't even like in a relationship or anything. That kind of makes it worse in my eyes. I don't know. I think that's probably what it is to me. Makes it slightly worse.
Well, this raises another question too. It sounds kind of sleazy to even ask this question, right? But if she is a android who's not a human, who doesn't have a soul, does it matter, right? I feel a little sleazy asking the question because I think it does, but it certainly raises the question.
It does, but I can't explain why, because I understand how someone can see it's not, but my eyes, just because I have human emotions always back there and how she had false memories and stuff, it just makes me feel so bad for her, and I just going to add to let's say, and we'll act like she's a human. It's going to add to trauma. Because she clearly felt a little bit of traumatic experience with finding out she wasn't indeed a replica. So it just made it so much worse in my mind.
I could see the argument for it. I agree. I think it does matter. I think because she did have like that humanoid aspect to her, but I could see the argument saying that no, it didn't matter because if she's an android, she's machinery, pretty much just like a blow-up doll. So it shouldn't matter because she shouldn't have emotions. It shouldn't have phased her at all. But you could tell that it did phase her So I do think it does matter, because she's more than just a machinery and more than an object. But how they viewed the androids in that time would say she did report it to the police, which I know she wouldn't, but they would say, well, you're pretty much like a doll. It's all you are. You serve a purpose. And like when they was talking about those people, like the one that feminine one, I forgot when the beginning of the movie how they referred to her, but that some of them that was just a purpose. And I don't think anyone would have took it seriously if it was brought up in the movie, like in that realm. If that was like that realm, no one would took it seriously. But I do think it's matters because she did have emotions to it.
Yeah, I think you said that well there, Jessica. This is another, I told you guys a second ago, like we're not far off from this Android technology. I'll have to send you guys a YouTube video later showing you how real they actually are starting to look. But this is another thing that we're probably going to be asking ourselves in our lifetimes, right? Will these androids be made for the sex industry? I mean, it's something that is probably going to happen, right? So I think the movie's probably not far off, even in showing that some androids will be made for that purpose. So not only slavery in terms of work, but also that sort of slavery too, right? That's something that we might be looking at when it comes to these things 20 or 30 years from now. It's a little bit of a scary thought, right? When is the moment that they will actually, if this actually does happen, when will it come to the point that they actually will snap and come up with autonomy of their own? So, yeah, you guys certainly didn't expect to get a philosophy lesson today, right? But here we are. Sonny says, I believe they'll be made for that purpose because nowadays there is something created for everything and making changes. Yeah, what do you guys think of the movie now after our discussion? I feel like you walk away with a greater appreciation for it.
I can appreciate the movie, but it's not a movie I can ever watch again in my mind.
It still isn't my favorite movie, but I did enjoy the discussion we had on it. It's probably one of the most like heated discussions we've had. A lot of debate on the stuff we discussed. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with you all. This isn't my favorite film. I mean, I think the movie starts pacing is kind of sluggish. Like especially the first hour or so of the movie, I think it's especially kind of sluggish. But I do think it picks up in the last hour for sure. But I know the first hour of this, it kind of feels like a sluggish pace.
Yeah, I loved like the last couple of minutes of the film, but I wasn't that crazy about like the rest of it. There are earlier parts of it around the end, though, is when it really does pick up.
Towards the end, I thought that it was odd, like the Asian girl that was always like on the blimp that was above. She was always saying something, and it looked like she was always like taking a pill or a vitamin or something like that. And when I was reading about it and about the director, it had that he wanted he specifically wanted somebody that was, I guess, like Asian or Oriental, and he wanted to kind of, I guess, like really drive the fact home where it was so overpopulated and so crowded. I forget now. I looked it up, but I forget now what she was saying when she was saying it. But it was something along the lines of, "Don't forget to take your birth control pill." And then she would take one, and I thought that that was interesting because it did show on the streets, like it was showing. It was almost like reading into the future, like and maybe like pollution was maybe I don't know, like a theme or a factor, because it was showing like how dirty and how polluted and how dark, dingy, and things like that. So it was almost like that was something like overpopulated, overpolluted, and that may have been one of the themes of the movie too.
Yeah, going back to your comment from the beginning there, Stacy, that's a good point. I mean, this is supposed to be Los Angeles, blue skies. We've already seen a movie that takes place in Los Angeles, right? This definitely doesn't look like Los Angeles because of all the pollution, and all that good stuff.
It looks more like a dirty Chinatown, if that makes sense.
Right.
Wait.
Somebody gonna say something?
Yeah, one thing we didn't really discuss a whole lot was like the music and stuff used in the movie as well. I thought was pretty interesting. It had like all the weird sounds. It was kind of like dark and mysterious type of music, and they just had like these weird, like, just like, it just kind of sounded like just babble. It was just like gibberish. Just like little, I thought the music was pretty interesting. It was kind of unsettling and helped add to the film. Figured I'd bring it up real quick.
Yeah, that's something I didn't think about much in preparing for today. But I think you're right, Matt. That it had us have play a good effect. You can kind of hear like a lot of like techno sounding music in the movie too, which definitely helps add to that vibe the movie puts off.
Yeah, it was like techno, like what you would hear at the beginning of like an old video game or something, like starting up, or like when you would, score or something like that on an old video game.
That sort of synthesized sound. Stacey said it really well. It sounds like something you'd hear in like an any guess game or something. Aline says she thought that too. Yeah, I think it's a good way to close out noir, right? Noir is called dark film, right? We have all the tropes, but even our mise-en-scene here, like, it's very dark film. This is a case where we see how noir translates over into other genres. It faded out even though we watched two noirs in the 2000s, it faded out a lot after the 70s. But this is definitely a case where you see its tropes sort of going into the other genres. I mean, even like you can even kind of read Rachel as a femme fatale, even too, if you want. Right? She definitely has the look, the femme fatale look, right? Where she smokes the cigarettes and all that stuff, right? She has that sort of 1940s femme fatale vibe to her. So that's something else we didn't talk about. But there's another noir trope there too. So we're closing our unit on this. So I'm going to try to get an essay prompt ready for you guys for your first short essays. I'll probably introduce that on Thursday for a couple of minutes. So that'll be part of our class on Thursday. But also on Thursday, we're going to start our Westerns unit. And will be doing the movie Shane from 1953, which is one of the really great early Westerns. So the Westerns will definitely be a nice change up after the dark pessimism of the noir, because the Western is usually a pretty hopeful genre. At least in its earliest days, it was. So Shane's a cute movie. It's but it's also a movie like it's a nice sort of like family friendly Western. But at the same time, as you guys will see, there's a lot going on and under the surface, especially with like the relationships between the characters, stuff that they don't necessarily spell out for you, but it's implied. So yeah, I'm definitely going to look forward to discussing this one. It's a great early Western. I don't know if it's streaming on anything. Probably not. You don't see a lot of really old movies like this streaming a lot of times. You guys can look around. I'm not sure if a certain movie channel has it or whatnot. So yeah, that's our film for Thursday. We're supposed to have a presenter. Amanda is supposed to present. So we'll probably have something like that too. We'll probably have her leading class. So
You can watch Shane free on YouTube. So
free on YouTube? That's good.
free on YouTube.
That's awesome. So you guys won't have to rent it then if it's free on YouTube. So good. So we'll get several examples in the Western genre, Shane. Then we'll go do a Clint Eastwood spaghetti Western. And then a couple of recent Westerns. So I have Westerns is one of my favorite genres to teach. I'm really into them. So I'll definitely look forward to our conversations. Before I let you guys go, let me real quick write down who's here and all that good stuff. Eileen, I saw your message. I will say a prayer for you all that that's not the case. All right, guys. Until next time, see you then.